Okay, we're back again here at allpointstv.com. I have to look around to see what camera is on. I see the lights on here and also there, and some other lights on here in the studio. And I think I'm supposed to be looking here, right in your eyes here.
Yeah, the one straight right in front of you, closest to your desk.
Yeah,
That's when you
okay.
look at it.
Yeah, okay. So you got some of the cameras in here. I didn't have when I first started 12 years ago here at the studio. I didn't have that problem. We only had one camera in here. And then all these other people came on board. We're not sad about that. We're very glad that you came aboard. And we're just saying that we didn't have this problem of where to look because there's only one place to look, and you had to go and find the camera at that point because there's a small camera sitting over there on the mantle. And you looked to see you looked over there, and that was the camera you had. You know, I always tell this story. When we had people first come into the studio at the very beginning of my tenure here, we would have people in here. They thought this was a radio studio because the camera was so small they couldn't see it. And at the end of the interviews we'd be doing, I would say, okay, well, you can watch us on YouTube, and you can see it also on the network. And they say see it, and they would be so surprised because they didn't see the camera. They didn't see the camera in here. They were trying to figure out how's the camera in this room. Well, they're coming here now. If you walk in this door with your eyes closed, you're going to bump into a camera, stump your feet too. We had some big cameras in here, and they're all sitting on tripods and things of that sort. We've grown so much over the 12 years, and we continue to advance. I walk in here every Monday. I don't know what to expect. New background scenery, and each show has its own background. So we continue to advance, and we're very glad you're part of the advancement. We can't do anything here without you. And we're very glad and very honored that you would tune us in each Monday. We come on at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. And we stay around, much to the disdain of a lot of people that like for us to come in and get out of here. In less than an hour, we're here for an hour from 2 o'clock to 3 on Mondays. And I try to be here, and we'll be here unless I'm out of town. And even then, we try to do some shows ahead of time so that the show can go on. And I want to say this about you, Tucker Carlson. You took a vacation, and we're going to miss you for the next week because I look forward to your program above all the programs on these network programs. Your cable show is the only one I watch anymore on. I think it's the only one I watch on weekdays on Fox. I do watch Mark Levine on Sunday. Let's see, what else do I watch in that program on that network? Not too many programs.
But you know the person who was the real marathon runner, I think, for being on air was Rush Limbaugh. I mean, he had a 3-hour daily show where Tucker Carlson's like an hour maybe, right?
Yeah.
And but anybody though, I've doing this and seen you preparing other hosts, I mean, or other speakers come in. There's a lot of prep work, and of course they have a support staff, like Tucker Carlson.
Yeah, and a monitor and a teleprompter.
And stuff, but still quite a bit of effort. But Rush Limbaugh was able to carry that out 3 hours a day.
Incredible.
I mean, he did have prep, but I mean, preparation, people were prepared for it. But I mean, 3 hours.
That was
amazing.
He was he was rightly the most iconic figure in radio. You don't have a Rush Limbaugh that comes along every day. And his program from 12 to 3 was another program that was well worth listening to. I don't think he would have made it on television. Johnny tried television.
He did. Yeah, he did. I used it was early mornings. I saw him on.
I saw him. Why do you think he didn't make it on television?
I think basically it just I think it was more of a drain on him. I think that was a drain on him. And another thing is too, I mean, but he did have a huge following because I was working at the university, and back then there was probably more, more amiable people back then, and it wasn't so like sexualized or fragmented as is probably currently going on there. I haven't been around there since 2001 on a regular basis to see but what I've heard rumors of, it's really bad there. So if you actually professed or mentioned you listen to Rush Limbaugh now, they'd probably find a way of firing you.
Yeah.
Right out, or maybe arresting you, having you arrested.
Yeah, don't try to express your opinion anywhere because it's not allowed. And that First Amendment, we keep talking about. We have a First Amendment. We have the First Amendment rights and so on. But I don't see any examples of it in the media. And there are things you can say on Facebook. I write on Facebook every day, and there are things you can't say on Facebook without the fear of being banned. I think they're kind of intimidated. Well, here I'm saying this that they're intimidated a little bit by my articles on Facebook. I write on Facebook every day, and I know what I'm saying. They're not going. I know they're not going along with what I'm saying. Because I'm not. I'll tell you something. I'm not writing for the choir. The few people that read my article, I commend you because I'm not writing for the masses. I'm writing for the masses, but whoever shows up, shows up, and I'm not changing anything because I'm trying to appeal to a much wider audience. I could do that if I would do a number of things, like play some music and tell some jokes, and maybe do the funky chicken on the side. But I'm not doing that, and I am. You see what you see is what you get. I would say this too on the QT and running. Dennis Prager made a comment the other day on this program. I do listen to what Prager says. I sometimes get a little winded, but I do appreciate his intellect. And Dennis Prager has been on radio longer than anybody, John. The guy is now in his 40th year.
I was just made aware of maybe it's 8-10 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And I agree with, Prager is a neocon. He still likes perpetual war.
That. Yeah.
He's a neocon. He is not he's not a person who really, he likes portions of the Constitution and what it would actually be like if it was actually fully implemented. Prager is definitely big government. He's big. He wants the intervention wars. He's a Zionist. I'm not, I don't believe in all that stuff. So I don't discredit him for everything, but I recognize what he is,
Yeah, he's he's Jewish, so yeah, I would not be surprised. The extension of that would be the Zionist intent, the importance of Israel and things of that sort. I understand that, given the Jewish history in the 30s and during Hitler's reign of terror in Germany from 1933 to 1945. So I can definitely understand the orientation. Not that I'm in agreement with every aspect of that, particularly after reading Alison Weir's book that you gave me, John, Against Our Better Judgment. A great book, and it really filled in a lot of holes for me for a lot of other things I was reading and trying to fill in some of the holes on some of the readings I had done that helped concretize it for me in that book. And but Against Our Better Judgment, it should be used as a balancing of all the other things that's out here because there is another side to the story. But there are certain I don't have a lot of time, and my time, I thought when I retired I would have more time on my hand. And I remember when I was hearing people that were retired telling me they were more busy in retirement than they were working. I can never understand that. I can never understand it. I kept saying, how are you busier in retirement? Retirement is not being busy, isn't it? And I would ask them, how are you busier in retirement than you were when you're working full time, which is a 40-hour week? You got to be either 9 to 5. If you try to clock out, they're not going to dock your pay. They're going to come looking for your job. So you're there 9 to 5, and you better be there. If you're in the shop, you clocked in, you clocked out, and that's 40 hours that you're at a stationary place. And it doesn't even entail the other things you have to do once you get off the job and do things you have to do on your private in your private life. And I just couldn't figure out what they were saying until I retired. Now that I'm retired, well, I went from retirement. I retired from my public school job, and I went to the college I was already teaching at college at night, but I went to college on a daytime basis. But I still, which is kind of like semi-retirement because you're only doing the maximum for those professors is 12 hours a week. Of course, it's not even about teaching. It's about, I mean, for those peons like myself, it's about teaching because you pick up the jobs that the tenured professors don't do because they're busy writing. You have to write. If you're a tenured professor, you have to write.
But you know what I think is weird? If a person wants to become a school teacher, like say public school for secondary or primary school teacher, he or she has to go get teaching methods class and all that stuff under their belt, right? So it's part of their training. But a person who's going to become a college professor isn't required to do those. So I mean, they should. I mean, I think teaching methodologies would be similar. I mean, you might obviously you're going to be able to ramp them up. Should be able to at a person at older, people who are older, mature, chronologically as well, maturity, you would hope. But I just thought that was always strange that they weren't required to have those, which you would have had in hand because you were already a public school teacher for what, 39 years.
Yeah. In order to work in the public school as a classroom teacher, you have to be licensed. Everything's about licensing. And I wish they would license some security in these schools, and nationalize that. But in the classroom, there is a licensing process, and if you don't have the credentials based upon the licensing board in each of the states, then you're not going to be in the public school classroom. There might be some exceptions, like I know when I was in school in Birmingham, the exception was in the industrial arts part of the school. The humanities, the sciences, the math, and so on, the English classes were all in one part of the school. And over here, another building, they had the industrial arts building. And they brought in people that had experience in shoe repair. There was Mr. Hines, for example, who was out of my neighborhood, who taught in the high school across town. And he was there because he was a person who was in business. And they were, you're not going to like me saying this, but they were, in fact, personifying the influence of Booker T. Washington, who had the 4-H. You might think it starts with the YMCA, but the 4-H was head, heart, hygiene, and health. And the part of it was the industrial component. This is the industrial training aspect, and that was Booker T. Washington's influence throughout the southern schools. And you see it in terms of schools. You have ANI and A&M, agricultural and mechanical, those kinds of schools, because they were trying to combine using your hands, not just using your head, but using your hands, being able to do something, which I think these people in Congress should be required to do before they get there, and then stay there for a lifetime of tenure as a career politician, which we don't need more of. We need to get rid of the ones in there right now. This is Moss speaking, of course, and so you can take that with a grain of salt.
No, the other thing is, I think people should. You might have new listeners here and viewers. Mr. Moss has got a background that's unusual for people in this era because he actually went to school in the South, in both elementary public schools and high schools and stuff before they were desegregated, and also you went to a school that was a college later on that was actually a church-run school, correct?
Right.
Affiliated with the church.
Private school. It was a Presbyterian school. I really, I go back to that time period, and I have a lot of admiration for it. I'll be honest, when I graduated from college with my first degree, I was stunned when I came out. I had been out of the public school for 4 years. I was stunned when I would ask for homework. I started in junior high school, and I would call the roll, and they had to come up to my desk and put their homework on my desk. So I know the ones that were trying to skate by because if they didn't come up there, I knew they didn't have their homework. But I was stunned when they would say so brazenly that they didn't have the homework because they were absent the day before. That stunned me because I had not been out of the public school that long. I had gone through 4 years of of college. But 4 years prior to that, I was in high school. And the rule of thumb, it wasn't a written rule, but the rule of thumb in my school was that if you were absent, what you did was call your classmates and you found out what the assignment was. And when you came back to class that next day, you had your assignment like everybody else. That being absent the day before is no excuse. Why don't you have your homework? And that's what I was always asking. Why, Ms. Moss, I was absent. Okay, but why don't you have your homework? And I couldn't understand what tell me. Well, I was, and they would start moving. They start moving their head because I was absent. Like I was supposed to buy that. I tell you another problem I had when I first started teaching. I was from the South. I didn't know anything about how it worked in the North. Kids would bring me bringing up those passes to go deer hunting. And they want me to sign these passes where you'd be gone for 5 days from the classroom. And I wasn't trying to hear that. You're going deer hunting, what that do with math? Or in my field? And you're going to be gone 5 days to go do what? And that was allowed because you're not supposed to count that against them. But that's 5 days of homework they're not bringing it and put it on my desk. That's where I saw it. But I could see the slacking off that was beginning. And now, if you mention homework, it's like you're mentioning a foreign language. They don't want to hear nothing about homework. Homework what? So I saw the loosening, and now it's torrential now because if you assign homework, nobody's going to bring it in. They don't take that seriously. And there's no oversight at the home. The parents not going to look over their shoulder like my mom was doing. And my mom made sure that she didn't help me with my homework. I thought one day I got up, I'll never forget this. My mom taught me a lesson. I thought I worked on homework late at night and I got tired, went to bed. My mom knew I was working on my homework, and I thought she would then get up the next morning, and she got up earlier than I did, and I thought she'd help me with the homework and get the rest of it done. And when I got up, my mom hadn't done anything, and I said, when I tried to say, when I asked my mom about it, my mom said to me, "You expected me to do your homework while you laid up in bed and blah, blah, blah." And I went to class that day without my homework. And that was the last time I did that because I don't know what I was thinking like a child. When I was a child, I thought I was a child. And I did childish things. But my mom was expecting the adult child in me, and she did not buy that she should be downstairs, doing my homework. And I credit her for that because I never did that again, and it made me stronger. I realize now I got those grades on that report card. Well, my grade, I'll say make this last point because I don't want to talk about this all the time I'm here today. I brought some other things I want to talk about. But that's also when I began to understand that those were my grades on that report card. You can't tell me you couldn't tell me when I taught school. I was in the classroom 36 years, and I was principal 3 years, last 3 years of my career in public school. And you could not tell me that the schools were failing because the school is not failing on the weekend. And I knew that because whenever the schools were closed, they were not failing. So it wasn't the building. It was only when the buildings were open that the schools were failing. And it was failing because Johnny had his books in his locker. So you're not running that one by me. You're not running that one by me either. And parents used to get so mad at me because they would come up there, and the first thing they started telling me was what the teacher had not done. The teacher didn't do. They started the conversation out, and I say, "Hold it. We're not here to talk about the teacher." And they would say, "You always taking the teachers." And they'd be surprised. I say, "Yep," because the teacher got theirs, and your son has his to get. And I heard that 12 years, and I learned that. I may not have learned. I might have been Sam Cooke on that one. May not know much about history. I knew a lot about it. May not know much about biology, do something about that too. But Sam Cooke was saying, but I do know that I love you. Because that's what we're into that's what you're into when you're young and stupid. I mean, not that love is stupid, but it must be put in its place behind your your books. When you're in the classroom, you may daydream about your girlfriend, but that's not going to be on the test. And I found out in every class I had, and I'll tell you something, I wasn't buying a lot of the noise that they're making now, because I'd been to a school that wasn't buying noise. What they were buying was performance. And they didn't care that I came to school practically every day with cardboard in my shoes. And I could always tell when, on rainy days, I used to dread rainy days because by the time that day was over and I'm going from one building to another going to class in the high school, because every part of the school had its own building. If you were going to gym class, that was over in that place. And then the industrial arts was over here. And then the main building, which is a block long, this went a block long that way, was the main building that had all of the humanities and the sciences in it, and also the greatest class they had at that school, as far as I'm concerned, Mrs. Reed's class, which I only got to her in 12th grade. So I stayed around. I was glad I stayed around for that one. I would have missed everything if I had missed that class. And also Mr. Bond's class was primary. He had me in the library all the time. At least I went to the library as a result of his class. He wasn't sending me there. I went there on my own because I wanted to know more about what he was talking about. I mean, what he was saying to me was, I knew the man knew his stuff, and Mr. Bond, I know you're not here with us anymore, but I will tell you this. In the next life, that class that you had fired me up, and that's why I got my last 2 degrees, because of your class. And when I got there, eventually to Easton, I have to tell you this, I'm not bragging. People think I'm bragging when I say these things, but there was not too much they can teach me there. Because by the time I got there, I had already read everything they were talking about. I read, because of Mr. Bond's class, I read the Federalist Papers in high school. I know people don't believe that. That's true. All 85 of them. And I did that because I wanted to occupy my time on lunch hour. I didn't have any lunch. There's no sense of me standing out there acting like I was eating. I didn't have any lunch and didn't have any lunch money. But I didn't want my friends to know it. So I hid out in the library. But by the time I got to Easton, because I had been to all the other schools before I got there, and went to all the major schools. Started out at Wayne State, and went to all the schools. And when I finally got to Easton, working on my PhD, which I thought was going to give me some license to relax, but I found out you don't get time to relax. You have to continue to study, and there's no final ending to the educational process. Boy, did I find that out. I'm still reading, and went back and read this weekend again the notes that James Madison took at the Constitutional Convention. I went back and read that again. In other words, a lot of the learning is going back over the learning that you had, because you have new understandings of it now that you have more time to process it and to think about it. So I went back and read over the notes of James Madison this weekend, and went back through some of the tidbits of it, and read a very important comment by Elbridge Gerry, after which gerrymandering is named after this delegate from Massachusetts.
I had a guy make us a comment one time, and he was kind of an odd person, but I think he made a very valid point. He's about, look at the name of the word research. Mm-hmm. You research it. Mm-hmm. You're actually, if you're actually doing the initial, gathering information, that's a search. But when you're doing academic stuff, you're going back and researching it.
Right.
And I thought, I mean, I just the
Yeah.
way you put it, I just never. I mean,
Right.
I mean, it was like
You're relearning
epiphany.
it.
And,
Right.
yeah,
It's
you're
relearning,
relearning
isn't
it,
it?
right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's what you're saying you're doing is you're
Yeah.
researching it.
Yeah,
Yeah,
a lot of it, because when I was more immature, I mean, I could remember a lot of things because I had a pretty good memory, but I didn't have the maturity with the interpretation that you gain later, which comes with age, experience, maturity, the maturation process and all of that. And I had not gotten to the stage that I'm at right now, where I'm at, in a sense, the top of my game. I mean, I write on Facebook every day, but I couldn't write what I'm writing on Facebook today. I could not have written that 10 years ago. I could have written in good grammatical statements because of Ms. Reed's influence in 12th grade. I think it might have been her class more so than anything else, but it wasn't so much that what she taught, although she was an excellent teacher. But because of, I keep telling people this, the accusation she made against me in 12th grade, it's amazing how you can learn to look at something through a circuitous route that's taken to the learning and the relearning. But she accused me of cheating on a paper that I had written and passed in, and she told me to come to her desk. I never forget as long as I live, along with a guy named Adolph Davidson. Adolph Davidson, I think you're still here. I got to tell you something. When I wrote that paper for you, you should have read the paper. But she called me and Adolph Davis up to her desk, and she asked him, first of all, to recite what was in his paper because she didn't believe it. I don't believe you wrote that paper, she said to him. And what's in your paper? And this jughead had passed the paper in without reading it. At least you could have read over it, so you would halfway be familiar with what was in the paper. But he didn't read over it, so how would he know what was in the paper? And she asked him to recite it, to tell her what was in the paper. And he couldn't mention one word. She told him, I'll never forget it. Yet I can remember almost the gesture she used. She was one of those teachers that kind of got very impatient very quick with nonsense. She said, you didn't write it. And she did that flipping hand. Go sit down. And in her class, you didn't say, I ain't doing that. You went and sit down. And then she turned to me and she put her hands together and she sat up. She just knew if Adolph Davidson didn't write it and that paper reads like Adolph Davidson's paper, she just knew that wherever he copied his paper from, I copied my paper from it also. And so she turned to me and she said, and Moss, what's in your paper? And I began to tell her. And she waited for about maybe a minute or so. And she said, okay, you wrote it. Go sit down. In a different tone. Now, I could have gone back to my seat. I'd always share this with my students, too, where they would stop getting mad at me. But I didn't care whether they got mad or not, quite frankly, because my mom told me, if you think I'm wrong, then live long enough. And I learned that from her. But I would always tell a story to my students, because I know they get mad, because when you're young, you get mad at accountability. Accountability makes you mad when you're young, because you don't see the end game. And my mother would tell me, if you think I'm wrong, then just live long enough. And I can remember thinking at that time, I wasn't asking the question Tina Turner was asking, what love got to do with it. I was asking what living long got to do with it, because I couldn't understand what longevity had to do with in terms of my not accepting these words out of my mom's mouth. I do understand it now, of course. But I would tell it to my students because I wanted them to know something. And that is that when I was told to go to my seat, I think it was about 15 minutes left in the class period. And I went back to my seat, and the bell hadn't sounded for another 15 minutes. And I sat in my seat, nodding my head like this, because it finally dawned on me why I was getting those grades on those papers. But I never thought about it because I thought that you were supposed to be smart if you weren't playing basketball. Because, and really in my school, even the basketball players were expected to perform. But I sat in my seat for the last 15 minutes of that class period. I'll never forget it. And I thought to myself, I was nodding my head up and down, because it then all came to me. It all cascaded in that one moment of clarity through the accusation that she leveled against me. And I deserved it because I had written Adolph Davidson's paper. So she thought if that paper read that way and this paper read the same way, then they had the same author. If he didn't write that paper, then I didn't write it either. She knew the same author was in back of it. She never accused me of that, but I'm pretty much able to discern she kind of figured that out. And I sat there for 15 minutes like this, nodding my head, because I knew then that I was pretty good. And I have been writing in Mrs. Reed. I've been writing in Mrs. Reed's name ever since. That's why I write every day on Facebook. And there is nobody that can come behind what I write and say anything. I can guarantee you that. Because I write in Mrs. Reed's name, and I take that very seriously because of that accusation. And people think you're very arrogant. It might well be that, but I don't consider it arrogance. I'm just simply trying to say that there are certain culminating experiences that, in fact, point you in a certain direction. And when you find what that direction is and know that that is what direction you should have been on all your life, but you now found it, then that is to be very seriously taken. And I take it very seriously.
But I think is I just kind of clicked what you said about arrogance. People accuse you of being arrogant. I was just reading something. I think it was from Schopenhauer. Basically, he was actually ripping into this idea of like humility. Being humble is okay if you're in uncertain territory, But it's something you've actually researched well.
Yeah.
I mean, people are going to your pronouncement of that stuff, or your laying out of the information you got, is going to come across as arrogant. Those people, and the thing I've often got is I talk too fast. I lay out too much stuff. So I go back and I try to adjust that, because when you have something practiced in your head and you've heard it and you've seen it all adds up in the side of your head there. You come across as very arrogant, but sometimes you do. I have a tendency to maybe like run everything together. And a person who wants to, you just basically got to break it down in smaller bites for them. But I've gotten that charge too. But then the same people who made that accusation would go out and research information, or it came back to them and they'd come back, well, you were right about that. And it's like the big duh moment. It's like, I wouldn't go and open my mouth and, because I do have a ego to some degree on that. I'm not going to humiliate myself speaking on something I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to go out and make sure I've got some great idea of figure a great idea of what I'm going leading up to before I utter something in public, because I know how easily you could be demolished.
Yeah.
And I don't like to suffer that,
You're very careful scholar. I think that, it could be taken the wrong way. It's, everything is in the eye of the beholder. It's not just beauty. Everything is in the eye of the beholder. So there's the intent and there's interpretation of the intent. I know another example I can give you is that I was in Dr. Collins's class. This class met at 10 o'clock on Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Saturdays in undergrad, my first in my undergrad program at Knoxville College, which no longer is open, by the way. everybody started flocking to the other schools. But I went to school during the segregation time period. And I'm just trying to think about how that school functioned on the resources that it had, but it did function on the resources that it had. But they had a lot of close to retirement instructors that had degrees, so they were on the last leg. They weren't working at a major university, working there, and they had the credentials, but they were not like I don't think any of them were what you would call some were starting out their career, but most of them were kind of like close to retirement and were no longer of a great deal of use at the larger universities anymore. And they were working there. They were on top. They were good at their game, but they're not writing anymore. Let's put it that way. I don't think we had any professors that were actually writing in these intellectual treatises that's required. And I was in Dr. Collins' class, and he was bragging about how hard his test was, and what I would do for my test I would study for one real hard. The first one I would take real hard, and I would study for the others on a peremptoral basis, and get into the more hard study of the before the class would meet and the test would be given. And there were like 2 or 3 hours between class at that point, so I could do a lot of reading in between the time one test would be given, another time test was given. I remember Dr. Collins was up there in front of the classroom. He had a very big ego, and he was he was laughing at us. Ladies and gentlemen, I want you to know today that you can't pass this test, because I can't pass this test myself without my notes. He was a Kappa, what do you call a Kappa Alpha Psi or something like that.
Theta Beta Kappa.
Yeah, that's what it was.
Phi Beta Kappa.
Phi Beta Kappa. That's what it was. He was Phi Beta Kappa. And he wanted everybody to know it. He was the learned scholar. He had finished University of Alabama. I'm sure when he went there, before Arthur and Lucy had integrated the school. So he's now teaching in this all-black school, except a few. We had some transfer students who were not black, some Spanish students, a few white students, predominantly black college, and predominantly black teachers, not all black, but most of them were. And he wanted to rub it in. And I could tell a little bit of hint was in some of the biases and things he'd say, things like you have your hands on on somebody's back seat, and you call it hoofs. Get your hoofs, get your paws off that desk. So I could feel some of the vibes, but I was not going to confront the vibes because I was there. I wasn't there for that. I was there to get a degree, and I was determined to do that because I was not going back to what I had left. So in his class, since I had studied very hard for his class, I didn't care what he put on that test, quite frankly. There was nothing he could put on that test I was not going to be able to answer. I don't care what it was. And I knew that. So I'm just listening to him up there bragging about he couldn't pass the test without his notes. I'm saying, right. But I'm not doing it to be arrogant. I'm there to get out of there because I got to go back and study for these other tests. And so he was bragging, had a smirk on his face. He was up there passing the test out. Put tests on my desk. I started working on it because I'm trying to get out of there to go study for the next test. And he's up there talking about, ladies and gentlemen, you can't pass this test without your note. I can't pass this test myself without my notes. 15 minutes into the test, I got up and walked out. And there are all the students back there, you know how you do it on test day. You start squinting, your eyes closed, you're trying to get back there in the back part of your mind. Let's see, what did I read? And you open your eyes and write down the wrong answer. So when I walked out of the classroom, the students were looking at the teacher and wanted to know what that was about. They're back there squinting. This is in my this might have been my second year. Maybe I was a sophomore at that time. I think it was a sophomore. Yeah, I was a sophomore that year. And they said, Dr. Collins, they told me later on, grade his paper. So they say, Dr. Collins, they came and told me at lunchtime, it's Dr. Collins graded my paper. And then he asked, in this tone of voice, they told me, who is that young man? Because he was hot. Because I had made 95 on it. And he was up there bragging that he couldn't pass the test himself out of his notes. And I made 95% on it. And I wasn't using it in notes. He didn't like that. But that's what I'm talking about intent. He didn't know why I had left his classroom within 15 minutes. I was going to set up another test, but that's how you look at the intent and don't see the intent. You can look at a lot of things and think it's the intent, because intent doesn't show up visually. And when it came to class, it had been on a Saturday at 10 o'clock. That Saturday, the class met again. He walked across the threshold. I had just sat down, my books on my desk. I wasn't using for his class, but another class right before lunch. And he walked across the threshold. I never forget it as long as I live. He pointed at me and said to me, "You can get out of here." Threw me out of the classroom. And what did I do? What did I do when he said, "Get out of here"? Did I say, "But I didn't do nothing"? No, I got my books and got out of this classroom. But I'll tell you what else I did. Tuesday, I came back. And for the rest of the semester, I sat in my seat. And I didn't do it out of respect for Dr. Collins. I didn't have a lot of respect for him. I did it because I was not going to let this man who had his own agenda stop me, because I cannot be stopped. I cannot be stopped. And nobody can be stopped. All they can do is stop. People stop, but they cannot be stopped. And when you get knocked down, I'll tell you another thing. When you get knocked down, if you can look up, you can get up. I was not going to let him stop me, because I had a goal in mind, and I was not going back. I knew that. So I left. He told me to get out. I got out. Got my umbrella. It was raining that day. Got my books from under my desk. Got up very, very gently and left his room. And they gave me another hour to study. I knew what he was doing. He didn't know what I was doing. I knew he didn't know that. I knew he didn't know that. I knew what he was doing, but he didn't know what I was doing. And I never walked out of his classroom again. And let's see, did I walk out of other classrooms early? Yeah, I did. But they were not up there bragging about how hard the test was. And so in that training that I got, it kind of put me in a mindset when I was in the classroom, because I was the kind of person that I did not like a lot of excuses to why persons could not perform. I don't want to hear anything about some goat eating somebody's homework. They never said that one, but they used that one. I was not going to buy that either. Or the daddy left home. I didn't want to hear that one. The daddy left home, so the daddy didn't do the homework. I tried that on my mom. That didn't work. So I didn't buy a lot of things, because I had been made responsible by the people that were not buying excuses. I was poor. I couldn't go in there and tell them that I was poor and I therefore hadn't eaten breakfast, and therefore I didn't feel like doing anything. You worked on an empty stomach. you try to find You try to find somebody that maybe left half a sandwich somewhere in one of the waste baskets. You did some of that stuff. I mean, you found a way. I don't like excuses. You can make a lot of excuses. I don't like excuses. And I wasn't buying excuses. I know people don't understand that. I didn't like excuses. And I didn't like them coming there telling me what the teacher did either, because the teacher doesn't do the homework because they had already done the homework. That's why they're in front of the classroom. And I want Johnny to understand how you get up there in front of the classroom. You do it by doing your homework. I'll tell you another thing. You can't run affirmative action by me either, because affirmative action is homework. You affirm the action for yourself by doing the homework, and when you do the homework, you affirm that you belong in any space they put you in. I belonged in every class I was in, and it wasn't long before they found that out at every school I went to and every seminar that I've taken. I never thought. At Wayne State University, people found out. I was 1 year in teaching at that point. Went to Wayne State first in 1967. And somehow the students found out that I was from the South and I had gone to segregated schools. And during the break, several of them came around me and wanted to apologize. That was my first contact with white guilt, which I don't buy, and I didn't buy it then, I don't buy it now. And I don't know why anyone in this country is feeling guilty about something they didn't do. But they came to me and said, George, we found out that you went to a segregated school, and we feel so bad, and blah, blah, blah. And I'm sitting up there saying to myself, I don't know what you're talking about, because you're not going to feel sorry for me when they give that test, because I'm going to be in the top 5 in whatever that they test in this classroom. And I was better than that. I was in the top 2. I'm not, see, people think you're bragging. I'm just trying to share an experience with you so that you don't let life beat you up.
One of my favorite teachers of all time, well, she wasn't favorite back then, is Miss McCrae.
Mm-hmm.
Black woman, lived in pretty much the same kind of similar background that you went to, before desegregation happened in the South. One of the most challenging teachers I ever had, one of the most demanding teachers I ever had, but also she was looking out for the best interest of the kids down the road. And she kept me 3 hours one time. She had called my mom, made sure it was, they knew where I'm at. Yeah. But I was kept 3 hours because she didn't think I was pulling my weight in her class.
Right.
Well, I hated her then. For a couple of weeks after that, I didn't like her. But in retrospect, I mean, the thing is, she was a kind of a front of the family. Later on, before that even. And she went through the same situation you did. And she demanded a lot because she knew you could deliver. She didn't see this affirmative action stuff. She didn't want that.
They're the only teachers. They're the only teachers you remember. The ones that held you accountable. They were not memorable when the accountability was imposed, because of the pain in your life that it caused. But when that pain dissipates over time and you move into the centers of the places they were aiming your talent at, you look back and see that's why you got there. My mom knew that and I didn't know it. And life taught it to me. And that's why I'll be in Birmingham this year. This is the year of my mom's 100th birthday if she were alive. And I'll be there at her gravesite to pay my respects. I will tell you this, that the people that you remember are the ones that held you accountable. They're not the ones that licensed you to do whatever you wanted, because that's the easy road, made them popular at the time. But every last one of the person hurt you, and that's why you don't remember them, because they're easy to forget. once you find out that what they were doing was crippling you. I didn't have a lot of those persons. I had a lot of them that were on top of their game. They knew what it took. And because of the segregated environment they were apologizing for at Wayne State University, the fact of the matter is because of the segregated environment I was in that made them come down harder on us because they knew what the bottlenecks were out there waiting for us if we got out there in that segregated environment. I can swear right now on the Bible that I got more whippings in my house than my sister did because my mom was beating me down because she knew if she didn't take some of that energy out of my spirit, I was endangering myself. I really believe that because I was getting I was getting jumped on because my mom believed in strapology as a learning tool. And that blue envelope was coming constantly because my mom believed in telling you something, and the next time she's telling you and hitting you at the same time. The telling was still there, but the hitting was added because my mom had told me without the hitting, and I didn't get it. So my mom was going to get to learn it through a use of the back and the auditory nerves. They can hear through their back. And that's the way my mom taught. And 5 children, none of us went to jail. None of us got in trouble because we knew our mom was not going to buy it. I didn't have to have thou shalt not steal in church. I knew Elaine Foster Moss was not going to buy stealing because that would embarrass her in the community. And I knew what would happen if she found out I did that. Now, I do have to admit, I was in a couple of peach trees, but nothing more serious than that. I have to tell you this too, a little side point. I'm off my topic today, so I might as well stay off of it. I could never understand why those peach trees always grew in somebody else's backyard, never grew in our yard. We had pecan trees, but the peaches were over there in that backyard over there across the alley. There were some apples in the yard next door. We had a pecan tree, had to wait until the pecans ripened because they wait all summer to get ripe, and we out of school, and the pecans are green, and those peaches are ripening over there and across the street. And so I had to figure out a way to get in that tree before the guy, thinking the guy going to bed. But as soon as I get ready to get up and go over there where the peaches were, a light will come down the street. The light will come and it'll shine coming down the street on that back porch, and that guy would be sitting there on the back porch just waiting. He knew. And so that didn't work out too well either. But accountability is where I come from, and I'll be honest with you, I don't think it can work any other way. I've learned a lot in life, but I'll tell you this: one thing I have not learned is that I have not learned there's another form to be used other than the accountability model. You cannot go anywhere, and you cannot advance. You're not going anywhere in advancing without accountability. And that's the one thing that they taught, and that's what I try to teach, because I don't think you can advance without that. It's all about holding yourself to be accountable for your own acts. Now, what I'm looking at now, what I'm writing about on Facebook a lot of times, is that people cannot accept personal responsibility, particularly all these politicians. Ain't nothing their fault. Inflation, that's not their fault. That's Putin's fault. High gas prices, Putin. Guess why we're paying high prices at the store? Putin invaded Ukraine. Can't get the grain out of there. Putin's causing it. Biden is referring to Putin's high prices. People believe that. This man has no respect for anybody's intelligence. It's not his fault. And then this other thing that gets you is that the man wants to talk about they could lower the price at the pump. to lower the gas prices. They're gorging us at the pump. Here this man printed $7 trillion of worthless paper and threw it out there as currency in the currency stream of the country. He's blaming the guy at the pump. He was trying to eke out a living for the gas prices being up, which he alone and those politicians in Washington have caused. Inflation has a single cause: government interference in the economy. I know what they're saying. They're saying that it's too many dollars chasing after too few goods and so on and so forth. But why are there so many dollars out there? Because government cranks up the number of dollars and then weakens the dollars out there, causing weakened dollars that don't buy as much. And the dollars that are out there are counterfeited by the additional dollars that are added. And therefore, the counterfeit dollars, it takes more of them to buy the same product when it only needed so many of those dollars to buy things in the past. Now everything is double, some of it's triple, and some of it's quadruple. Nothing in the stores is under $5. But that's not because of the person behind the counter. That's because the government has counterfeited the currency, and that's a government responsibility. Government is responsible, totally responsible for inflation. And the only cure for it, there are some intermediate cures and there's an ultimate cure. The intermediate cure is for the government to get out of the way and stop printing this worthless paper. The ultimate cure is get rid of the Fed and get rid of Congress. And I don't know why we have to have Congress meeting every day. And we have to have 535 people sitting up there on a daily basis. To do what? To look for ways of showing relevance so people will vote for them in the next election, and to find something to do, which makes them busybodies, because if they're not doing anything and we don't see them having these committee meetings, we'll understand that they're obsolete and they're not really necessary on a daily basis. And the Constitution even says that Congress shall meet at least once a year, because the founders understood the impropriety of people meeting every day in government. Okay, I wanted to come here and talk about the Constitution again, because there are a lot of things I want to say about it that we're not getting around to. I want to continue to make some points about the document. I'll get back to that next week. Until next week, I want to have you, as always, to follow your dream. If you don't follow your dream, you'll never know what's on the other side of the rainbow.